Please support Gospel Tangents by purchasing a transcript available at Amazon.com or our website gospeltangents.com/shop. Proceeds will be used to create documentaries on Mormon history, science, and theology. We'd like to create some series, and we really need some support to do that. Thanks again for listening. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Ugo Perego. How do you figure out a 150-year-old DNA test? Modern paternity tests are quite different than ones where the potential father is long since dead. How does that work? We'll also talk about potential children that Joseph had with wives who were not Emma Smith. Check out our conversation. Well, this whole idea that you can trace back ancestors is pretty interesting. And I know that you've done more testing on Joseph Smith's potential children.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it was a fun meeting. That was last year up at Snowbird for MHA. So can you tell us a little bit about the Sylvia Sessions Lyon case?
Sure. So we nowadays we all know Joseph Smith was involved with polygamy, introduced it, practiced it to some extent. He practiced it in some sort of secretive way compared to later years when Utah polygamy was widely open, and everybody that was involved we have good documentation for. But back in the Nauvoo days, and was still fairly secretive. Not even the general membership knew about what was going on. And so especially events surrounding Joseph Smith polygamy are now still today very well documented. There is a great deal of speculation. Not speculation with regard was Joseph Smith involved with polygamy, but speculation based on to what extent.
So I have to tell you, I've had a couple of people that have said, no, he was a monogamist, but anyway.
Well, I think the general membership of the Latter-day Saints believe that today. Definitely the fundamentalists don't, but many people in the Community of Christ also were of the idea that it was a Brigham Young invention. It wasn't until a couple of decades ago that their church historian kind of say,
yeah. Well, actually, their prophet actually said, yeah, he was probably a polygamist. But the funny thing is, I actually have an interview coming out in probably about 3 weeks. I met a member of the first presidency of the Remnant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're a break-off of the Community of Christ, and
the president
he was
is
very.
Larson.
Yeah, exactly. He was very adamant that Joseph was a polygamist. It was a pretty interesting conversation. So.
Yeah. So there are still, even in today, even in the 21st century, many individuals that do not fully embrace the image of Joseph Smith associated with polygamy. They're totally fine with Brigham Young having as many kids and as many wives as he wanted. But when it comes to Joseph Smith, I can still see there is, unfortunately, but his idea that he was above a lot of things, and they have this Joseph Smith on this pedestal, right? And which is kind of hurt individual because he was a great man, right? I believe he was he did extraordinary things. The Book of Mormon is definitely one of the biggest miracles that has to do with the restoration. But at the end, the Lord purposely chose an imperfect, limited resources and capabilities individual. Otherwise, the greatness of the restoration has to be measured against Joseph Smith's humble origin. That discrepancy in my mind is kind of like you kind of really have to think about this, and it doesn't matter if you accept Joseph Smith or not. You have to do a lot of explanation to justify how somebody like him did what he did, right? And then you have to faithfully accept that. But that sometimes you bring Joseph Smith into the greatness of, and you think that he had, as a human, he was immune to certain things, which is not. He was not the savior. He was like President Elder Bernard once say, we are referring to him in the Quorum of the 12, we are ordinary people with extraordinary responsibilities, and that's where I think that's how I view Joseph Smith as well. So in any case, Joseph Smith did practice polygamy, did introduce polygamy. The historical evidence is undisputable. Is that even a word? Right? You can't dispute that at all nowadays. There is so much overwhelming evidence toward that, but we still don't know a lot of the details involved with that. How many wives did he really have? What type of relationship he had with each one of them? Because you have to take every single case individually. There is too much evidence that shows that not all the unions he had were lived in the same way. Was he having sexual relation with all of them? Would he have had them if he could? Maybe he didn't have a chance because of other surrounding events at that time. Was he sealed for eternity or for time only or for both? Were there any children? That's a big question born from any of these relationships. And we know that one of the reasons that was to justify the practice of polygamy was that to raise a righteous generation, right? And definitely Brigham Young worked at that. He had 50 more children, right? Joseph Smith was fertile. He had 9 biological children from Emma plus 2 that he adopted, so he was definitely interested in posterity to some degree. Like Nephi was very concerned about his posterity and what they would do and what they would not do. And but no one has ever been able to fully, up to the DNA era, to fully come forth with like, yes, we know that this other child was born of him through a polygamous relationship. So there always been a circumstantial evidence that would bring historians to make such claims. So and so is probably Joseph Smith's son or daughter because of A, B, and C, right? And so before Josephine, which is the last case that I presented, there are other cases that I am working on, but that's the last one that we reach a conclusion, an answer. I actually started early, I believe it was 2002, 2003 when I started working on some of those cases, and they involved sons. Those cases all involve sons. Josephine is a daughter.
Okay.
There is a different approach that you must take genetically to answer the paternity of a son versus the paternity of a daughter when it is something that happened 150 years ago. Nowadays, if you suspect that your child is not your child, regardless if it's a girl or a boy, you do a paternity test. You test the mother, the father, and the child, right? And there are certain markers, there are autosomal markers, they're called, that are very unique, and the combination of such can only be reproduced within a family. So either somebody is 100% not your child, or it is 99.99999% your child, okay? Which is just another way to say 100%, but DNA is as a one notch stronger in excluding relationship than it is to include. There is always a little chance that DNA matches because of chance, but the markers that you test are so many that the reality that there is really a chance.
I hope you're enjoying our discussion with Dr. Ugo Perego about DNA. Mormons are well known for researching their ancestors, but every one of us, I think, come up to a dead end at some point. Even Joseph Smith has a dead end in his family. Dr. Ugo Perego tells us about how he was researching Joseph Smith's ancestry. And come to find out, we have no idea where Joseph Smith came from.
We don't know where the Smith line came from in Europe, in England. The furthest back that the Smith line has been traced is in New England. In around 1620, 1630. That's when the first ancestor of Joseph Smith shows up. And he's 12 years old, and he's by himself, no mom, no dad. And he shows up in Boston, right? and is an indentured servant. His name is Robert Smith. And where does this kid come from, right?
Click here to subscribe, click here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some other videos that we've done here on YouTube. We hope you'll use this as a valuable resource to learn more about Mormon history.